Can I just get a confirmation from someone that you can see my slides? Thank you. Okay, we'll get started in 2 minutes. We'll get going. Okay, well, welcome everyone. As people trickle in, we're just going to get started here. I will not be able to see any raised hands. So if you have a question, maybe throw it in the chat box and I'll pause periodically to check to see if there's any questions. And then there'll be a little bit of time at the end as well for any follow-up questions. But thank you for being here. My name is Doug Deluzin. I am the director of the Professional Development and Career Office, which is located in the East Baltimore campus of Hopkins in the School of Medicine. It is a graduate career office, so predominantly doctoral and postdoctoral fellows, but we also help masters here and there as well. And we work a lot with the Futures Office. And today, my talk is called Tailoring Your Resume. This is going to be tips and tricks on just how to tailor your resume, particularly for a focus on federal jobs, because the federal resume is a little bit different from your typical resume that you might put together for a career in industry or in policy or humanities or another type of job outside of academia. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat box. I will check that periodically, and then there'll be a Q&A at the end. Let's get started. So first, I just want to acknowledge that a lot of the slides that I put together from this presentation are actually from a prior presentation by Dr. Kate Bradford, who was the prior PDCO director. And I'm very grateful for her for sharing these slides with me. So for today's talk, we're going to do an overview of employment options for the federal government. So if you're thinking about working for the government, how do you access the government? How do you get a job with the government? And particularly, we're going to focus on Usajobs, which is the main avenue of access into the federal government for full-time employment positions. We'll talk about eligibility, application process, and then a bulk of our time here today, this afternoon, will be about federal resumes. So just a couple disclaimers. All of this information is up to date as of today, but it is subject to change. Federal agencies tend to have their own unique way of hiring, and that can be very different between different agencies. So that's generally when I'm talking about, say, the Department of Health and Human Services versus the Department of Energy, or sometimes even within the Department of Health and Human Services. So for example, the National Institutes of Health, the environmental, or the Centers for Disease Control, and the Food and Drug Administration. Each of those own institutes may have some of their own unique nuances and policies. So it is best to make sure you understand some of those nuances by going to their web pages and reading through how you get employment at those agencies. But overall, most of them are accessed through Usajobs. And so this is kind of a general catch-all review of how to do that. Eligibility requirements can and do often change, especially if you are a foreign national. So We will be talking about if you are an international trainee, what types of jobs you might qualify for in the United States federal government, and how you can inquire as to whether or not you are eligible for particular jobs. So as a brief summary, only 15% of US jobs in the federal government are in the Delaware, Maryland, Virginia area. So obviously around DC and Baltimore, there are jobs all over the country and spread out pretty wide, including even Hawaii and Alaska. But the Northeast, the North Central, the Mountain West, we find that a majority of jobs are really outside of this area, even though this area is such a hot market, for example, with all the federal agencies being located in and around DC. There are kind of three different ways you can access getting a job with the federal government. The major way is becoming a federal employee, and that really is through Usajobs, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But there are also other types of positions that allow you to work with the government, even though you're not considered a government employee. One of them would be working through a contractor company like Kelly Government Solutions, where you are actually an employee of Kelly Government Solutions, but the United States government has contracted with Kelly for you to do your work in their facilities. So you're technically not a federal employee, but you would be given a federal badge, you would be accessing the institutes depending on what your job role is. And then the other way is through something like a fellowship or a different program. And this is very similar to like a postdoctoral position or a one-year specialty program. One example of that is the ORISE program, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. And these fellowships, again, if you're a fellow within the FDA or the NIH or somewhere in the government, you are not technically an employee of the federal government, but you are working with and for the federal government. And so some of that can be technically, there could be technical differences in your job, your benefits, and your retirement that may or may not reflect what the federal employees would get. So Usajobs, it's the main portal to finding a federal full-time position with the United States government. And it is a website. So you would go to www.usajobs.gov. And this is a catch-all database that you can search for different jobs by location, by job type, by degree requirement, by host city, by salary. It is a database that pretty much all the federal agencies will dump their job postings into, and that is exactly how you'll access them. So Usajobs is really, when people say Usajobs, they are talking about this website in particular. Now, I mentioned earlier that you could be a government contractor or you could be a fellow. And these agencies that are generally not going to be posting their positions on Usajobs. So again, some agencies use contracting positions to fill needs when there's not an open federal position, and the contractor can move in their federal positions once it opens. So for those that maybe are trying to get into the federal government full-time, you might start as a contractor. And then after you have developed a relationship with an institute or one of the agencies that you're working with, oftentimes then people will pivot into a full-time position and become a full-time government employee. So remember, as a contractor, you are not an official federal employee. Your salary and benefits are provided by the contracting agencies, and these are just a couple examples of some of those agencies. These positions are not listed on Usajobs. So what you would need to do is search and go to the Kelly government website or the Ripple Effect website or the Leidos website and search their open positions. And those positions will discuss the qualifications and exactly what type of agency you would be expected to do your work with. Government fellowships are also very similar. They're temporary positions. The eligibility requirements for these different types of fellowships vary depending on the agency and position. Some of the most famous ones include the ORISE fellowships with the FDA and CDC, the Presidential Management Fellows Program, in which you will be working within the executive branch of the federal government. Some of them are traditional kind of research-based postdocs for those of you that are in STEM, or a wide variety of training-specific fellowships. There are fellows at all levels, from masters to doctoral students to postdocs. So if you are a master's student, there are one-year PMF programs and ORISE programs that are intended for those that have just earned their master's. Arun, what are the other eligibility criteria? Should the candidate be a U.S. citizen? We will get to that in a moment. Thank you for your questions. We will cover that. So some are formal cohort-based programs with long application and selection periods, including the PMF programs, which those applications are being taken right now. And some are more like academic postdocs. So for ORISE fellowships, you might find advertised online a fellowship at the FDA, where you might just send your resume and your application directly to the hiring manager. So we'll talk about how that works with Usajobs versus ORISE. There's no guarantee of full-time employment upon completion of the fellowship, though it is an excellent way to get it in within the institute that you may try and be working for. So some agencies have their own specific fellowships. So I mentioned FDA fellowships for the NASA postdoc program, CDC, NIH. Some of these agencies have their own fellowship programs that these jobs are not listed on Usajobs. They're more like a fellowship one year, 2 year program where you would apply directly to the NIH or directly to the FDA for those jobs. Whereas the Usajobs portal, you are directly applying within the portal itself. And then your information will be funneled to the hiring manager or the hiring team for the jobs you're going to be working about. And we will go into more detail about that in just a moment. So again, ORISE fellowships, the Oak Ridge Institute for Science Education. These are fellowships for federal government agencies. A lot of the agencies, particularly those that do research, are going to have ORISE fellowship positions. There are positions open for those with a bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degree and beyond. Some of them are term limited to 1 year. Some of them are renewable up to 5 years. Citizenship status and or being a permanent resident or green card holder is going to depend on the agency. Some jobs are absolutely going to require that you have to be a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident to hold these positions. Some of these positions for fellowships in particular do not have a citizenship requirement. And so to make it a catch-all on a slide like this, it's very hard to say yes or no for citizenship requirement. You will just have to read the job description or the fellowship description. There are searchable databases for ORISE opportunities. So for instance, at zintellect.com/catalog, you will be able to search through a lot of different fellowships and identify if any of them are ones that you are eligible for, particularly if you are an international trainee. And then there are science policy fellowships through a lot of different science policy programs and institutions like the American Association for Advancement of Science, the PMF Presidential Management Fellows. These are all positions where you would be working for the society on behalf of the society, and then also working within the federal government as an intern. So again, you wouldn't technically be a full-time federal employee, and these positions are not advertised in Usajobs. They're just a little bit different, and you would have to go to each of the individual institutes or societies to identify the openings that they have there. So let's go back to Usajobs and kind of start diving into the nitty-gritty. How do you become a federal employee? The first stop, and really the only stop to begin with, is working with Usajobs. On the whole, Usajobs is pretty intuitive, but there are a lot of tips and tricks that we're going to go through today to help you strengthen your resume, help you strengthen your job application, and understand some of the nuances that can occur at Usajobs, because there are a few of them, and understanding how to navigate them can really help your chances of landing the job that you want with the federal government. So eligibility and citizenship. Most federal positions in Usajobs do require U.S. citizenship or permanent residency. There are some positions that will be open to other types of J1 or H1B visa holders. Those will be advertised and explicitly stated on any job posting that you find in Usajobs. And in fact, one of the first criteria that you'll see when you open up a new position in Usajobs is the eligibility criteria. There are some organizations like the NIH, particularly that in industries that rely heavily on having international talent here and training in the United States, that will look at eligibility and have a lot more flexibility. As well, when I mentioned that those government agencies that actually contract out positions, so Kelly Government Services, Leidos, Ripple Effect, for example, most of them will have positions that will consider different visa statuses. So you really just have to go through and take a look. And so hopefully, Arun, that helped and answer your question. On every posting, you will also see this bar up at the top, and it'll say this job is open to the public. So, for example, anybody then in the United States that is a citizen or a national or permanent resident is eligible to apply. There are also jobs that are open only to those that are already federal government employees and are looking to switch careers or switch to a new agency. And so that is going to be very explicit at the top of the job announcement. It'll say, this is open to the public, or this is open to military, or this is open to a specific subset of the population. And so just be sure to read those job descriptions carefully so that you know whether or not you're eligible to apply. Again, for those of you that jumped in a little bit late, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. I'll be checking that periodically. And then at the end of the talk today, we will have a general Q&A for anyone that's interested or has additional questions. For those international trainees that are here with us today, there are additional resources for you. So I've listed them, some of them here. Some of them are on Usajobs, looking at employment of non-citizens, Department of Homeland Security, Citizenship and Immigration, looking at jobs within immigration services, the Office of Institutional Research Sourcebook, and then the NIH Division of International Services. All of these provide really great resources for you to explore a little bit deeper into the job process when it comes to whether or not you need to navigate your visa status if you're an international fellow. So I encourage you to make use of those links. These slides will be posted online as well as the recording of the presentation. Yes, I will be able to share those slides. What about for a DARPA program management position? You will have to go and look at the specific job description at DARPA. I don't know offhand if DARPA will take a non-US citizen. I'm not sure. It's probably very project and job dependent. And you'll have to go to the DARPA website and look through their job openings and take a look at the job descriptions. That would probably be my best advice. It's a little bit timely, unfortunately, but it's probably going to be the best way to answer your question. All right. Now, jobs that are listed on Usajobs are broken up by professional occupation or different job code. You absolutely do not have to search for jobs this way, but it is a one way where if you are looking for something, for example, in information technology, you can search a job series with the code 2200 and pull any job at any agency that is going to have the code for information technology. I've highlighted those that are in science, but physical sciences, mathematical sciences, there's also a lot of communication, public health, general administrative, cleric and office services. There are jobs for humanities. And so these codes are just a different way that are internalizing and identifying the different job types that are there. You can always just search, I'm looking for jobs in DC, or I'm looking for jobs in Baltimore, or I'm looking for jobs in Montana. And that will pull up only those current open positions. Okay, so this slide is just a very brief overview of kind of the entire process, and we're going to kind of break down each of these in greater detail throughout the rest of the presentation. But on the right here is kind of a path forward for you if you decide that there's a job at Usajobs that you will apply for. The very first thing you're going to do once you discover a job you want is you are going to have to create a Usajobs profile. It'd be very similar to creating a LinkedIn account for yourself. You are going to input information related to who you are, your contact information, most importantly. And then I highly encourage you to create a master resume for yourself that is searchable by hiring managers that are going to be posting their jobs to Usajobs. We'll talk a little bit about what that's going to look like in a few minutes. We will spend a lot of time today discussing the federal resume and how to put it together. But as just a general overview of the process, you create your profile and search for jobs. If you find a job you're interested in, you'll review the job announcement, prepare your application, and then you will submit your application to the agency. Then on the back end, what happens is the Usajobs will send your application materials to their hiring managers. And then there's several passes. First, HR is going to review your application and score it. If you score high enough, and we'll talk about what that means in a moment, they will pass along your specific recommend your application to the hiring manager. And then a hiring manager, if they're interested in interviewing you or hiring you, will reach out to you at that point to discuss the job. You might have several rounds of interviews and then the job offer. This process can take a while. So for most jobs in Usajobs, the time from position creation to hire can vary. The average for a job with NIH is 62 days. Some jobs average a little bit quicker. A lot of jobs will average a lot longer. So this is kind of a patient waiting game. If you are thinking about applying for a position when you finish your degree here at Johns Hopkins, it's not too early to apply for a job 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months out. It does take time for the government to go through all the applications and to set up interviews and go through that process with. Most applications will ask for a resume, a cover letter, and then the agency questionnaire. And we'll dive into those details in a few minutes. Job announcements are generally open for a short time window, sometimes just a few days, sometimes a matter of weeks. And so it would be, it's a good strategy to create your Usajobs profile and then set up an alert email for you that will send you either daily or weekly updates on job types that you want to hear about so that you don't miss windows of opportunity for you to apply. So when you get to the website, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to create your profile. I highly recommend that you do not use your JHU email address, particularly because your email address may change when you graduate or things might get lost in spam. You want to use your personal email address so that you get any updates right away. Once you've created your profile, you can find jobs and create job alerts. So you can search for favorite jobs. Usajobs will keep a record of the types of jobs you've searched for. And then you can set up an alert system so that if there are particular jobs or particular types of jobs you're interested in, particular locations where a job might be opening, you will be alerted right away that that job is up and live on the website. If there's a job that you're interested in, then what you would do is create your resume for that particular job. And just like creating a resume for any job that you would be applying for, you want to target your resume to be specific for the job you're applying for. What a helpful strategy to do is to create kind of a master resume that sits in your profile in Usajobs and is searchable by anybody that is submitting job descriptions to Usajobs. Then they would maybe target you specifically, say, hey, this job is opened up, please apply for it. Looks like you have the skill sets that we need. And so this master resume would be kind of like a catch-all resume of your skill sets, your interests, a lot of other things you would find on a typical resume. But when you find an opportunity that you really want to apply for, you will then go in and tailor and create a specific resume for that specific job. So you can explore different hiring paths. Again, most of them are open to the public, but then there are opportunities that are open for just students and recent graduates, military spouses, individuals with disabilities, families of overseas employees, those of you that might be in the National Guard. And so there are different types of hiring paths that are open and available to you in Usajobs. Most people, though, that have just entered into the Usajobs portal will look at these as the jobs that are open to the public. So a job opportunity announcement is going to look like this. You'll see the title of the job. So this job is called an interdisciplinary scientist. It is with the Department of Health and Human Services, and in particular, the Food and Drug Administration. You will next see if this job is open to the public or just career transfer within government. In this case, this job is open for the public. This job is from a few years ago. The opening and closing dates. So this job is open April 3rd, 2018 and closed April 16th, 2018. That typically means at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the job's closing. And so this is a job that was open for about 2 weeks. Generally, there's a salary range and the GS grade scale for your pay, as well as a work schedule, and then often the location of where this job is. So this job is located in Silver Spring. And then there's also an announcement number and control number. The announcement number is very important because when you write your cover letter for a particular job within USA Jobs, you want to include that particular announcement number in your cover letter. Just to state that I'm applying for an interdisciplinary scientist at the Food and Drug Administration, and in particular job a number announcement, and so on and so forth. So those are kind of the key facts you'll see in any job posting for the USA Jobs. So job alerts. Some jobs are only open for a short time, sometimes only 2 days. Generally, when a job is open for only a day or two, it usually means they have a candidate in mind already, but you should feel very, very free to apply to that position anyway. And some of them will be open for a span of a couple weeks. Also, some jobs may have a limited number of applications that will be reviewed. So they may only have the job open. The job opening may be for a month, but they're only going to review the first 100 applications. So getting in early is always ideal and better for your chances at being reviewed and taken as a candidate for the job. All right. Okay, we have a question. I'm already a government employee at GS9 within the I qualify. This is a great question. Kenneth, we're going to come back to this one in a little bit because I think some of the stuff I'll bring up will answer some of your question, and then we can definitely dive deeper into this in the Q&A because you have, you have some really nuanced questions. I think to give a better answer not only to you but to everyone else here that's participating and viewing, I think I want to catch everyone up on some of the other background that you probably already being at GS9. So yeah, I will get back to this, and if I don't, please just unmic and shout out during the QA just in case I forget, but I don't think I will. So how do you hear about jobs first? The job alerts on USA Jobs is a very good way. The different agencies that you might be targeting. So for example, if you are interested in the VA or the FDA, they will often post their job openings on LinkedIn or on their Twitter accounts and social media accounts. So you want to follow those as well. Some of the agencies have their own job boards, so you could visit those frequently. And also networking. Sometimes there are internal listservs at agencies that often advertise open positions, and you can get on those listservs sometimes and hear about them pretty quickly. So your resume is your application. The federal resume is the most important document that you will be sending to the HR and to the hiring manager for these positions. So before you start your application for a particular job, here are a couple things that I would recommend that you keep in mind. First, read every word of the job announcement and then read it one more time. Focus on the following sections to understand whether or not you qualify for the position. This is very critical information. So duties and qualifications, eligibility and status, location. Do you need a particular degree or particular type of degree to qualify for the job? How to apply. There will be a walkthrough of the different application materials, and then there will also be a walkthrough of how you will be evaluated. This is generally in addition to the general evaluation protocol that most jobs go through at USA Jobs. Make sure you have the required experience and education, and also hiring agencies use the job announcement to describe the job and the required qualifications, including level and amount of experience and education. One important thing to note about experience is that paid experience, of course, is experience, but volunteer and unpaid experience also qualifies you for experience for a lot of jobs in USA Jobs. So if you are looking at a job that requires 5+ years of working as a teacher, for example, and you have 3 years working as a teacher, but you spent another 3 years as a teaching assistant doing the things that a teacher does, that experience may qualify you for the job, just as long as you are very articulate and very, very upfront about the types of experiences that you have had. So don't discount yourself if you read some of the first lines of qualification and realize, I don't know, I haven't been paid as a doctoral student for 5 years doing this. Your volunteer research experience, for example, or your 6 years that it's taking you to get your doctoral degree, that all counts as experience, even though it's not necessarily paid experience as in, it's my full-time job. You're a graduate student and that's paid, of course, but You might be volunteering for a lab or doing other types of teaching. That all can count as part of your experience and level of education. So don't write that off as time wasted. Your experience in your application needs to address every required qualification. And so that will be the list of qualifications that are going to be in the job announcement. And we're going to take a look at a couple of examples in a few minutes. What happens then is once you submit all of your application materials, the first thing to happen is that all applicants are screened by HR specialists. Your application will generally be reviewed by someone's eyes. They might use computer assistant programs and algorithms to help weed out incomplete applications, for example. But your application will be reviewed by HR specialists. And your application will then be binned into 3 categories. You'll be eligible, which means the applicant meets the requirements stated in the job opportunity announcement. You might be qualified. You meet the qualifications stated in the job opportunity announcement. And then you might be best qualified. And these are the highest ratings of the ratings that are given to applicants during this initial screen. Any applicant that's best qualified is rated high enough to be forwarded to the hiring manager. So you need to get a score generally of 90 or better on their internal score sheets to be moved along to the next round. And Usajobs will update you when it finds if you are eligible or ineligible or qualified or not. You will be told that, and you will generally be updated at some point as to whether or not your application has been moved on to the hiring manager. So federal jobs often require that you have experience in a particular type of work for a certain amount of time. And your job in the resume is to show your skills and experiences meet the qualification requirements listed in the job announcement. This includes dates, hours, level of experience, and examples for each of your work experience. So what does that look like in a federal resume? Well, let's compare that first to a standard typical resume. If you were applying for a job at PNC Bank or at 23andMe or at Google, for example, a traditional resume is just 1 to 2 pages. It might be scanned by software or human eyes. Employees are going to be looking for candidates whose accomplishments match the job description. The federal resume is longer. Even for those of you in your master's programs, it might be 3 to 4 to 5 pages. It will be read by human resources personnel. And you're typically going to complete not only your resume, but a qualifications questionnaire as part of the application process. And we will talk about that in just a moment. What is the questionnaire and how can it help you get the job that you want? And those who score high enough, again, are considered best qualified. And then you will be referred to the hiring manager. Generally, you format a traditional resume. The federal resume does not have any formatting other than text should be flush left and ragged right. And you will basically be using their input system to put together your resume. So, creating a federal resume, a couple of things to think about. First is that you can create and save up to 5 resumes. You can either upload your own resume, and then that will be scanned by the system, and a federal resume will be created for you, or you can build one on your own. I recommend the strategy of just uploading your a personal resume and then seeing what the federal resume looks like. You will undoubtedly have to go in and fix errors and fix different things, but it is a way to at least get some of the information on your resume into a federal resume. A lot of people build a master resume that's searchable by anybody in the Usajobs system. And by anybody, I mean hiring managers, HR, companies that are, or institutes that are hiring, agencies that are hiring. And then you would take that resume and tailor it for the particular job you're applying for. But you can also upload writing samples, cover letters, transcripts, anything else that that particular job opportunity announcement is asking for. Most of them want your undergraduate or graduate transcripts. They don't have to be official, but they do want some kind of copy. Most jobs will require a cover letter or other types of writing samples. For those of you that might have veteran status, you will most assuredly have to provide documentation confirming that. So in the resume builder in Usajobs, you are going to be putting in your work experience. And remember, the work experience is going to need to reflect the qualifications and needs of the job opportunity announcement. So just like a resume, you're going to go in and put your employer name, when you worked for them, maybe their address, their salary. You can indicate whether or not they're allowed to contact your supervisor. Whatever you choose for these two categories is not going to influence whether or not you get a job. They do want to know if that was a federal civilian position for those of you. So I know one question, someone's already in Usajobs, so you might have to change up that answer to that question. And then you'll put in duties, accomplishments, and related skill sets at the bottom. These duties, accomplishments, and related skill sets should reflect the duties and related qualifications needed for the job. And we're going to go into an example in a minute on how you really write that in. But it could be paid work, it could be volunteer work, and it could be leadership work. So again, for those of you, especially that you're still in school, you're building out your different skill sets, you're spending more time building out your different careers, you can put in volunteer work with committees. You can put in unpaid work working as a TA. That all qualifies as experience in Usajobs. Pay attention to length of time and hours required. There's no page limit, and you're going to do this in reverse chronological order. So you're going to start with your most recent and then go back in time. And then again, you want to tailor each resume to each position. And then helpful hint, again, make one comprehensive master resume that is searchable to agencies, and then you will take that and tailor it for each job that you're applying for. In your education section, you'll put in your education, the different degrees. If you have multiple degrees, you should put in one for each. So if you hold a double bachelor's, for example, you should create for your education, you should create one for each bachelor's degree you hold, a master's degree. If you're in a PhD program, even for those of you that are in a PhD program and you might have gotten an honorary master's degree, you have a master's degree, so you should reference that. And then, of course, a lot of the applications will ask for the references, up to 3 generally, of professional contacts for you. Other types of things that you can put into your federal resume. And this is where you can really tailor it to the specific job. If you have any particular training or certifications that are related to the job you're applying for, you can put that in the job-related training. If you're a member of any organizations that are related to the job, any other type of additional information, if you want to list from your CV or from your resume, excuse me, particular types of professional publications, research papers, articles, white papers, you can put that in here. And then certainly you can add in different skills, whether you know multiple languages, you know computer programming languages, or different types of software, particularly anything that might have been highlighted in the job opportunity announcement. So let's take a look at an example here. So this is an example of the responsibilities for an epidemiologist. They need you to identify and analyze public health issues and their impact on public policies or scientific studies or surveys. And then all these other lists of things. What you want to make sure is in all the work experience that you're putting in your federal resume, that you are covering all of these individual responsibilities in your work history. Whether it was paid or unpaid, what you want to do is identify exactly what it was that you did and what the outcome of it was what you did. And that is what you're going to put into this section on duties, accomplishments, and related skills. If you have multiple jobs that cover, say, this first key point, you've had 3 positions that identify and analyze public health issues and their impact on public policies or scientific studies and surveys, you can repeat that in your federal resume. So for each particular job, I would go through and make sure you will highlight what experience from that job covered what the responsibilities are. And your task then is, by the time you fill out your work experience for all the different jobs that you're going to upload in your resume, you have checked the box and shown that you have experience in all of the duties and responsibilities listed here. And if you can do it multiple times through multiple different jobs, that's going to make your application even stronger. So a few different ways where you can really put together a very strong response to the duties and responsibilities that are going to get you to that best qualified job is providing different experience. What is the amount of experience and the level of experience? And it's okay to be repetitive about it, particularly if you've worked a couple jobs or volunteered in different positions that overlap in those responsibilities. The way you can do this is, provide the accomplishment. Who was impacted? I reviewed a public policy statement for a society in Baltimore looking at lead use in X and Y neighborhood. How well did you do the task? This led to a change in public policy from the Baltimore Department of Public Health that influenced lead control levels in said neighborhood. So you want to provide kind of like the accomplishment. What did you do? Did you exceed a deadline? Did you provide savings? Did you change or improve something? How well did you do the task? What was the outcome of that? And you can go right back into the responsibility. So for instance, provide advice and assistance in the development and implementation of procedures, methods, and strategies. You can use those words. I provided advice and assistance in developing new lead control policies in Baltimore City. This led to a reduction in lead exposure for children, 10% over the last 2 years. Now you've provided not only a context in what you did specifically in your jobs to provide advice and assistance in the development of this particular job duty, but you've provided both the accomplishment and the impact of the accomplishment right in your federal resume. And that really is the tip and trick that will help bring out the best qualified rating for your resume, is really showing what the experience was, what did you do, how does that relate to the job description of the job you're applying for, and what was the impact. So language matters, and you can kind of list some of these duties and responsibilities just like this, even in 2 sentences. I'm responsible for planning, executing, and coordinating cell biology laboratory training. I served as a primary instructor for all new undergraduate researchers. And then afterwards, I developed and executed numerous detailed and realistic training courses for 3 undergraduate researchers yearly, rated as the #1 instructor over 20 peers in performance reports. So this is a before and after kind of 2-part answer that directly addresses, probably in the case of a laboratory position, what exactly the duty was that you accomplished. And so that is how you would be strategically thinking about taking the duties and responsibilities listed in a federal resume and teasing out the things that you did during your work experience that support your qualification for that position. Here are some other examples. So the duty or the responsibility from the job description: evaluate research protocols and operating procedures by applying expert technical knowledge. This individual, Susan epidemiologist, actually just highlighted this particular duty and copy and pasted it into their federal resume and then expanded upon it. So the one thing you don't want to do is just copy and paste the duties in the job description and put them in your resume and not provide any context. The HR reviewers are going to see that right away and they're going to toss your application. What you need to do is really fill out the nitty-gritty. As a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Maryland School of Medicine, we evaluated and improved, blah, 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 blah. Not blah, 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 but here is now updating all the different granulars that you did in that position and applied expert technical knowledge. And so you broke it down very easily for the hiring managers and recruiters to see. Same thing, coordinate multiple disciplinary teams in the conduct of scientific duties. And they've taken that and broken it down by example and their different positions. So in one work experience you might have as a graduate student at Johns Hopkins, this is what you did. And then your other work experience, you might be a postdoc fellow at University of Maryland, and this is what you did to support this particular job requirement. And maybe as both, you managed and directed high school, undergrad, and postbac students to present scientific studies. So it takes time to build this out in the federal resume, but the more time you put into it and the more carefully you construct your resume to reflect the particular job announcement, the stronger your resume is going to be for that position and the more likely that the HR is going to score it higher. Now, some agencies will require additional materials. So agency questionnaires, for example, are often multiple choice or open answer. So you would submit your resume And then it will take you through the portal to the agency itself, and they might have additional questions. And we'll take a look at what that is in a minute. Your application is not finished or submitted until all the application portions are complete, including these questionnaires and personality questions, and until you really click the button that says complete, submit your application. So here's a really big pro tip. Oftentimes, the multiple choice questions or agency questions are going to give you more clues as to what they're looking for in their candidates. So my recommendation is just create a dummy resume, submit it into the job you're applying for, get to the agency questions, and then copy and paste them into a Word document as you go through the questions. Don't submit your final application, but then you can go back and edit your resume. And you can fill in the resume to reflect the multiple choice questions. So for example, you might have a choose one answer that best describes your education or experience and meets the basic qualifications for a biologist. This is just an open-ended question of, do you have the degree that they want? So you would check yes or no. But here, this is a competency level question. So perform risk assessment characterization that integrates exposure to and/or toxicity of industrial chemicals or other environmental contaminants. A couple things about this multiple choice question. One is they want to really make sure you understand and are qualified to carry out this activity. So along with it, if this particular sentence isn't in the job description on the job opportunity announcement, but it is popping up in the multiple choice questionnaire, you want to make sure that your resume talks about these specific things so that when you select I am an expert on here, and then they go back into your resume to make sure you're an expert, it's very clear to the resume reviewers what it is you're citing as your experience for this particular question. So the strongest resumes on USA Jobs are ones where not only are you writing your resume to the job opportunity announcement and showing in context your experience for particular job requirements, but you're also incorporating anything that you're catching out of the multiple choice questions. Another tip I would recommend is generally always consider yourself an expert when filling out these multiple choice questions. If you put in, I perform this task, or I have some experience with it, generally this is going to weed people out and say, they're qualified, but they're not best qualified. So this may go back a little bit to your question in the chat box, Kenneth, is that, and we'll go back to your question in a minute too, but, for any of you answering multiple choice questions, you don't lie. I mean, you're probably, if you're not, consider yourself an expert, or if you're not, well qualified for a particular task, you don't want to lie about it because you'll be caught out. But generally, one way that they will weed out applications is if someone isn't answering, I'm an expert in this. My personal opinion of it is you don't necessarily have to be a complete expert in this. And oftentimes it'd be impossible to be a complete expert, but you should still answer it that way anyway. And make sure that whatever your experience is that you're putting in as an expert is at least contextualized in your federal resume. Open field answers, oftentimes you just have to write in writing or editing samples or provide authored reports. I wrote 8 reviews as an invited peer reviewer. So again, the action and the results. I did this, and this was the result of what happened when I did it. And those are often very good open field answers for some of these questionnaires that you might be answering in USA Jobs. We're getting real close here. So I want to make sure I leave it, a few minutes for questions and answers. So what happens after this? The agency will notify you that your application is received. The agency will review your eligibility qualifications. They may conduct additional assessments, and then you will be ranked based on those qualifications. The best qualified will be sent off to the hiring manager for interview selection and then potential job offers. So really, you're trying to not only get through the first wave of the system, which is get past HR and get your application into the hiring manager, but then hopefully then having an impressive enough resume where the hiring manager wants to interview you. So there's 2 steps to this process. So last but not least, some useful tips and tricks. Federal resumes are long and descriptive narratives. There will be several pages long. They will be read by humans. So be succinct and powerful and contextualized. Don't assume that human resources will infer anything. Be specific, precise, and specific, and be repetitive if you need to be, to make it very clear that you are qualified. The HR specialist will read and score your federal resume, but you basically need to tell them that this experience counts towards this particular job qualification. To be best qualified, you really want to be relevant micro details. Have I attended any trainings? What job experience do I hold that is directly related? What knowledge and skills? Everything that can make you stand out, you should include in your federal resume. One other thing to remember is that formatting is not really a thing with federal resumes. So if you are doing a list of duties for a particular work, you can just use hyphens or asterisks and put things in capital letters if you really wanted to stick out. Bold, italics, underlining, none of that carries through in the USA Jobs federal resume. And with that, I'll just take questions and answers. Some additional resources on the PDCO website and the Futures website are here to help you navigate USA Jobs. Feel free to reach out to me. And I'll go back to this question here and I'll read it out loud from Kenneth, and then I'll take any others. So it says, I'm already a government employee at a GS-9 within the VA hospital. I qualify my credentials and experience for GS-12 positions, but USA Jobs always asks in the app if you have experience in the government at the GS level to which you're applying. If not, they seem to skip over your application. How do you get around this? Can you move from a GS-9 to a GS-12 or higher? So yes, you can absolutely move from a GS-9 to a GS-12, especially if you now have all the experience required for it. The matter is convincing the hiring resource, human resources and the hiring manager that you are qualified for these positions. So what I would do is I would answer, yes, you are qualified. And I would then make sure in detail you write out what is it about the GS-12 position that makes you qualified. So if you're looking for a particular job that is a GS-12 job, you want to make sure that you are overemphasizing that you have this many years of experience in this particular matter. And as long as you are identifying your years of experience, the type of experience, and contextualizing why that experience matters, that should be enough information to help you qualify for that GS-12 job and convince the HR that you're qualified. The other thing too is I would always say that I am an expert. I'm an expert in this particular thing. When you're going through the questionnaires, you know, if it's asked, are you qualified or do you have the credentials for GS-12? You would want to say yes and always answer that. I've definitely applied through USA Jobs many times. There are also other jobs that I thought I was qualified for and the hiring manager has not said I was qualified for. I know people that have asked to apply through USA Jobs because they were supposed to be hired and the hiring managers or human HR said they're not qualified. A lot of times it just means it's not obvious in the federal resume that you have qualifications at that level. So I would go back and take a look at your resume and see where you can add in additional context to really show, you know, whether it's through multiple work experiences that you have that experience over and over again. That's really what it's all about. Is there any type, so hopefully that helps answers your question. Kara asks, or Kara, is there any type of government job that's considered equivalent to entry level? Some of the positions in USA Jobs will say it is an entry level position. Generally, GS-9, GS-10, GS-8, that grade scale, that pay scale are generally considered entry level, not always, but sometimes. And so I would say that the context of the position matters. If it says like intermediate or beginning scientist or like basic biologist, that's generally the entry level. And then you would work your way up through that once you're in the job. Let's see here. There are multiple questions about security clearance. Irina, maybe you can add in a little bit more context to your question. Let's see. There are multiple forms that need to be filled, like prior military or military family. Other forms I've never heard. I was disqualified because I filled out those incorrectly. Can you talk about forms to fill out? Yes. So some positions are going to ask about your security clearances if you have one. I am not too familiar with those particular forms because I've never filled them out myself. And generally for most positions that I'm familiar with, a security clearance is not necessary. Generally, those are going to ask that you have a particular security clearance in hand already. So if it's a secret clearance or top secret, generally those, you're going to know what clearance level you are already. if you have it, and you'll just need to provide documentation for that. Those forms probably mean then that either you need to provide additional documentation. If you are a prior military vet or from a military family, I honestly do not know about how to fill out those forms in particular. So in that case, my recommendation is first try like the frequently asked questions on usajobs.gov. I know they're very detailed. It may also be useful to reach out to like a USA Jobs recruitment manager, and there are many on LinkedIn you could reach out to who might be able to help you with some of those specific forms, because I do not know and I apologize. Okay, Journey's question. So time and grade does not prevent you from moving to a higher GS level. Not necessarily. Generally, it's going to be all about your experience. So if you come in at a GS 10, for example, or GS 11, you're going to work through the different steps of the GS level, say from GS step 1 to step 2 to step 3. Oftentimes, you might need to switch to a new position to go up to a higher GS level, or you might have to apply for a promotion, in which case there would be a position that's opened up on USA Jobs that you would apply for. That's generally one of those positions that might be only open for 3 days because they already have a person in mind. So you'd be that person in mind. But the length of time you spent in either grade or in a particular grade, I don't think is going to necessarily matter. I mean, generally, you should be going up a step or 2 every year anyway, as you gain more experience. You might need to be at, say, a GS 11 for a year or 2. From my understanding of it is like, if you were a GS 11 for a year, you might now, immediately qualify for a GS 12 position. That doesn't necessarily mean you would get it, but it means that you have the experience enough to qualify for it. So hopefully that answers your question. In adding, Annabelle, in adding volunteer positions, should you volunteer if the position title is not technically part of the title name? If you're adding in volunteer positions, you could volunteer in position. I would say that it should be very clear whether or not the position is paid or not. So you might need to put in the, in the resume, in the description section, that I volunteered to do this for this many years. So even if it's not technically part of the title name, so let's say you're an admin assistant for, the Baltimore School of Public Health, and you're volunteering your time to do that. If it's not paid, it should be it should be clear whether or not it's paid or not. Maya asks, you mentioned applying 3 to 6 months out, but for jobs that require a specific degree that you're in the process of getting, I've heard that they don't really want you to apply until you have the degree officially in hand or a month or less from graduating. What is your advice on when to apply if you're still 3 or 4 months from defending your thesis? That's a great question, and that is tricky. Yes, generally having the degree in hand is important. I would say that if you've already passed your thesis and defense and just haven't walked yet, go ahead and apply. You basically have your degree. I say it's always worth applying anyway, because the job application window is going to close, and you could just make it very explicit in your cover letter that this is the date that you're applying for. So the hiring manager will probably still just look at your resume. I'm sorry, the HR specialist is going to look at your resume and say, okay, this person's qualified or not. And then the hiring manager will get the resume, but also your cover letter, and take a look at that. And you might be able to explain some of the nuances there a little bit. My default is apply, because you just never know. It could be that one agency is going to say no right away, but another agency may be like, well, we understand how this works for your doctoral degree, and we just want to make sure we have the right candidates in mind. You could also generally, there's always on a job opportunity announcement, an HR specialist that's named at the bottom. You could always reach out to them and say, hey, I'm applying for this job. This is where I'm at. What are your recommendations for language to use, or am I not qualified? And you might be able to get some additional information from that individual as well. Follow-up question. They usually specifically ask, are you a GS-12? Are you saying that although I'm a GS-9, say yes and highlight your experience? Oh, I would say no, definitely don't lie. So if you are not a GS-12 and they're asking, are you specifically a GS-12? You would say no. But if the question is, do you have GS-12 experience? That's more open for interpretation, and where I would probably say yes. So you definitely don't ever want to lie. And I apologize if that came off incorrectly, if I was encouraging you to do that. I would say that if it's specifically asking you, like, if you're a GS9 and they're asking you, are you currently a GS12? You're clearly not, you're a GS9. So you would say no. I don't think that is going to disqualify you immediately from a particular position. I think it just needs to be very clear then in your resume that even though right now you're a GS9 and you're applying for a GS12 position, you have the experience and the necessary qualifications to be a GS12. Let's see, Arun, this may sound naive, but can you please explain a bit more about the grade? Is it directly proportional pay scale? Yeah, let me pull up that real quick. Hopefully I'm still recording. So basically, we'll just pull up the table for Washington, D.C. For most people coming into the federal government, most jobs generally are assigned a grade scale. And this is done by HR, and you have very little control over it. You might be a GS11. And so the starting salary for step one, like a beginning level GS11, is $74,950. And then either each year or each promotion, you would go up a step. And then a grade 12 is going to be a little bit higher up in responsibility, maybe closer into admin, and you would start at a base salary that's a little bit higher. So when they say grade, they mean what grade are you? Generally, GS15 is the highest for a civilian, and then there are executive grades and things that are above that are for appointed political positions and things like that that are at higher levels. I feel like Anthony Fauci is, for example, makes several $100,000 a year. So he's not like even a GS15, he's something else. But for most all of us that are going to be jumping into the federal jobs, and it's not an appointed position, or you haven't been in the job for 30 years, you'll be starting at anywhere between, probably for those of you with a doctoral degree, anywhere between like GS9 and 12, roughly. And sometimes some jobs would be like the job is open for either someone qualified for a GS11 or a GS12, in which case there's some flexibility within HR to place you somewhere in this system. One thing to keep in mind is it is better overall for your career and promotional path to start at a lower step at a higher GS grade. So for instance, you might be given a job offer where you could be at a GS, for example, GS step, let's go with this, GS step 8, grade 11, but you only have a little bit more steps to go before you max out at that grade level. But if they're also offering you a GS12 step 1, it's actually less money than GS11 step 8. But the opportunity to advance to a higher salary is much greater. So you want to think about that long term. The higher the grade level, the better when it comes to your salary, especially when you're comparing to the grade below you in a higher step. Great. So hopefully that helps. I know some jobs have from pay scales like ZA. Does that mean it's a federal position? ZA, that can mean that it's internal to the institute itself. So a ZA, I've seen that with like on like NIH jobs where a particular ZA position, it just kind of depends. Generally anything on USA Jobs will be a federal position. Sometimes the ZA jobs are going to advertise like a fellowship or something else, in which case I would, if it's not explicit in the job opportunity announcement, whether or not it's a federal position, I would email the hiring manager that's listed in the job opportunity announcement and confirm with them. Brian, can we add a short section listing any relevant academic coursework to the job posting that we've completed during our time at school? Absolutely. So I'm going to go back to my slides real quick. That would probably go into, for example, the additional information or job-related training. So I would say like specific coursework that really covers like one of the major qualifications you're looking for. If they're looking for a programmer that knows Python, for example, and you've had professional papers published about using Python, you've developed new source code for Python, you've taken courses in Python, you have a certificate in Python, you would want to add all of that in. Absolutely. All right. Well, I'm going to stop sharing here. Any other final questions? All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate you all coming in, and hopefully this was helpful. The recording will be linked up on the Futures website and the How to the Future website in the next couple days. And thank you all very much.